Hello, Sylvie. How are you?
Hi, Richard. I'm great. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. It's morning for me. It's like mid-afternoon for you. So, first and foremost, thanks for taking the time out of the middle of your day to come and chat with us. I appreciate it.
Always happy to do a podcast. I love podcasts. Actually, I have a podcast, and part of why I have a podcast is I have loved like long form radio. I mean, for
Mm,
many years, like I used to listen to This American Life, and then
mhm.
I would listen to like all the episodes of Serial when podcasting first started. So,
I
anyway, it's
love
my
that.
great pleasure to participate.
Well, we certainly have that in common because I love talk radio as well. It's one of my favorite things to listen to. So that's amazing. And first and foremost, we're joined by Sylvie Milverton. Welcome to meeting you where you're at. And Sylvie is the founder of Lynx Educate. And I think that's really exciting. And we were just talking for a few moments about some of the similarities and the parallels that we have in terms of the time we've been in the workforce. But I want you to take a minute to just kind of introduce ourselves. You have this interesting arc, Sylvie. You started as a CFO, or you've moved into this founder role. You kind of transitioned from leading finance and operations to co-founding Link Educate. Would you just take us through the thumbnail real quick?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, it's definitely, I am, a new entrepreneur. And I would
Mhm.
say like the guiding arc or theme of my career has been international business. And in
Mhm.
fact, like I sort of am an international creature, and that's what I've always looked for. And so actually, I started my career not even in that. I did, back in the 90s, I studied like liberal arts, and I have a master's degree in French literature. And I came to
Wow.
France in my 20s to study that. And then I realized that I had this like business interest. So I switched and had a, international analyst job, and then I realized I needed an MBA because I was missing all, like, the practical,
Right.
financial analysis skills, and then after that, it was interesting, I finished my MBA in 2002, right after September 11th, which meant that it
Mm,
was really, really hard, to enter the workforce.
sure.
I had moved to DC with a job that I just found, and I was lucky to have it, and then I fell into education
Hmm.
because what I was looking for, the first job I had, it didn't work out as um, they often didn't at
Often
that
do. Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
moment in time. And I went on monster.com and I thought, gosh, in the Washington, D.C. area, isn't there a job where it requires knowledge of French, knowledge of Spanish, international, and an MBA? I
Mhm.
typed that in and up came a business analyst job at an education company in Baltimore, which
There you go.
became Laureate Education. And that's what put me on this like international education path.
I love it. I love it. Another similarity you and I have is, I was a foreign language major myself at the University of Connecticut, Russian, Eurasian studies, Slavic studies. So we have that in common. And my path went down into that getting graduate degrees in healthcare and public health, and your path was MBA. So we have a lot of similarities, which is exciting. You kind of mentioned this a second ago, Sylvie. You've worked across Latin America, US, Europe. I think you just described yourself as a global creature, which I love that. How's this international lens sort of shaped the way you think about education, equity to education, lifelong learning, access to learning? What have you seen different across the globe?
Yeah, we had a great, Laureate is a great company that started buying and operating universities around the world, but in Latin America is where I was really working. And,
Mm,
back in the mid, early 2000s, we really, built these universities as sort of middle and bottom of the pyramid. And it changed the face of, middle class Mexico, these like
mm,
hundreds of thousands of students going through those courses. And you just realize like a university education, or and now things are changing a bit, but education in general can make such a huge impact. And
mm,
then, first those were like in-person courses and then online, and then we expanded in Brazil and across a bunch of other countries. And, this marriage of education as a business. And so there's a lot of money in education, there's a lot of resources. Those are, Laureate is a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. Lots of private equity companies are investing in education. I don't think there's anything, bad. It's good. Like
yeah,
education can be good, but you realize that there's this marriage between like business outcomes and education outcomes, and you can create an amazing, virtuous
Mhm,
circle
mm,
for that. And so it's
mm.
like, all right, what what is our role as education leaders to do this? I know it's an industry. Listen, because I love international, and I think education is one of these nice industries where you get people who are maybe sort of like me, like analytical, thoughtful, like results oriented. Like there's a way that there's like a marriage of like the thinking and the execution that is like appealing to me.
I like what you just said about the marriage of the execution and the thinking, right? Because we can't just kind of wallow in the academia of it. We actually have to kind of move things forward and execute and get things done. And I think I appreciate what you just said about the analysis piece of it as well, Sylvie. So let's talk a little bit about Lynx Educate. Yeah, I find you guys have this really sort of powerful mission and the impact that you're doing, sort of this business case that you have been building around social mobility and sort of education as a social impact driver. Talk to us about Links Educate.
Yeah, so I founded this 4 years ago. Actually, it was during the pandemic. And how I got to it was, I moved to France to be CFO of a different
Mhm,
French private higher ed group. We exited that to another private equity owner. And I was thinking, like, what is the thing that I can do next? And what was interesting is Europe is further behind like the arc of ed tech than the US. So whereas in the US there are like lots of publicly traded companies, Series D,
mhm,
Series B, Series F, and Europe was sort of earlier in that journey. And so I thought, okay, I've seen the end of the movie. Maybe I can find, join a sort of growing ed tech company and find my place. But I was obsessed with this business model of how companies can use education to solve business problems. And I was
mm,
really inspired by a company you might know called Guild in the US
yeah, sure.
that figured out how, if companies with a lot of rotating workforce of frontline workers can offer them tuition reimbursement education benefits, you can drive like huge ROI and huge operational savings by offering education. And so this was the idea that inspired me, and I kept looking in Europe for a company that was trying to do that, and I would consult for a company and say, "Wow, don't you wanna just start, offering education at companies to solve this?" So finally I thought, "Okay, no, let me start, my own company," which was, you know, it's funny looking back, like, how naive I was of, like, just because you have a good idea, it, like, turned that into being, like, really a company, but that's the thesis. It's that companies have business problems, whether it's reputation, whether it's efficiency, whether it's reaching new customers, whether it's risk management, reaching new markets.
Mm,
There's lots of ways you can solve this problem. You can buy Facebook ads, you can pay influencers, you can sponsor conferences, you can give free samples. You can also offer free education to the communities. It's a way you can solve these problems. And so that is what we help companies do.
we have a little comic here that kind of draws a circle around the jobs that are available. And then you, the job you want, which is outside of that circle, right? And that kind of truly purely is the definition of entrepreneurship. And I just see that so clearly in what you just stated, Sylvie. You said, well, these things didn't exist. So here I go, creating genuine opportunity, both for educators as well as employers. Um, can you walk us through the mechanics a little bit, Sylvie, of how partnering with employees work, partnering with employers, I'm sorry, work for you? You talked a little bit about corporations investing in employee learning, but I guess what does your model look like?
That's a good question. So where we are now, for example, like we have a couple big clients. So one is Deliveroo. So they're a gig platform, not in the US, but across Europe and Middle East. And Deliveroo sponsors free education for gig workers who are not employees, but are one of the stakeholders that they need to
That's cool.
engage with. And so they offer them free language courses, digital skills boot camps, cooking courses, lots of certificates. And so we manage this benefit, this perk for gig workers, 100,000 plus gig workers and their family members
That's cool.
uh, around the world. Another one that we're just launching is with IBM Skills Build, where they have their own free skills platform and they're committed to skilling 30 million people, in the next 5 years. And so we're a partner where we're connecting with a lot of charities,
Mm,
organizations, and different groups of young people to bring them to that platform.
mm,
Um, and if you think of the use case for each company, you Deliveroo, they're solving a few problems. One is like a corporate DNA. Like Deliveroo actually wants to do right by the community and wants to engage gig workers, but they do have regulatory pressure on the fact that they're not full-time employees. And so to get ahead of that story to say, but look, we are helping people
Offering these other things. Yeah.
offering these other things. A lot of our gig workers prefer to have a flexible work arrangement. And so we want to support them because we know that this is like a temporary transition and
Mm,
we're going to help them get on their way. The IBM use case is a lot around brand recognition, making sure that young people associate IBM with AI and cybersecurity skills and then get those skills as they move in their career. So that then when they end up working in a company, they'd say, oh, you know what? IBM is going to be a great resource for us when that person becomes, whatever job they're going to get
right.
later. So that's our model. It's finding a company that's ready to sort of invest in the community as a way of solving a problem that's right in front of them.
I love that thesis. It's amazing. And as you're talking to it, I'm thinking of all of these opportunities where you're doing like this true workforce development, right? And creating opportunity. And the gig worker thing I think is so spot on because we know that is increasing because people, like you say, they want the flexibility and the lifestyle that's associated with doing this kind of gig work and to be able to have those benefits or have those opportunities where normally you think they wouldn't, right, is really special. So that's amazing. That's great.
Mhm.
You had a very successful career, Sylvie, as a CFO. We talked just a little bit about that. You've seen exits, and you did make this decision to become a founder, and kind of not just a founder, but a founder of really a purpose-driven business. I feel right, impact-driven vision that you have. Now you need to turn that into a scalable business model. How much are you kind of leaning on your finance experience and your expertise to do that? So many of the folks that listen to the show, they want to pivot into entrepreneurship. They want to take maybe their 15 or 20 years of experience and see if they can go out on their own. Versus some of the folks that listen to the show that are at the start of their career and know that entrepreneurship is what they want to do at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how, you know, your expertise helped you, but maybe in some ways did it also hold you back?
Yeah, it's a really good question because that, like, I guess all of us, like, our greatest strength is our weakness. But it's interesting. I'm definitely not. I mean, now that we've gotten past the 0 to 1, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are really like, their thing gets big enough and then they're like eager to start the next thing. Like, I'm not eager to start the next thing. Like, I am definitely more of like,
You're leaning in here.
growing. Like, now that I have a lot more to work with, more people, more product, more customers, I'm, like, definitely happy. So that was a learning. I would say another thing is, I am actually an excellent CFO, which what that means is I'm an excellent operator and I'm an excellent number 2. And when
Mm,
someone else has a vision, I am I'd hire me again tomorrow to do this. I'm like really good at just connecting all the dots, getting things done, organizing things. I'm very analytical. And in fact, if I lean into my completely natural habitat, I can just like sit quietly in my cave all day and like work on a spreadsheet, really. And so it has been I how to say, I underestimated how much I needed to put that comfort zone to the side and
mm,
become this new version of me, which I also am now, where I can like so happily come on this podcast and with joy talk to you. And I could do this 3 more times today. In fact, I have 2 or 3 sales calls this afternoon
nice.
after this. And like that has been like a big transformation. And even learning um to take that like visionary role and let my team execute. Yeah, it's been like I have coaches, I get ask my team to help me, I have therapy. I mean, all those things because it's like the company is not going to work if
Yeah.
I stay kind of stuck how I was. But I'm part of I did this for a couple reasons if I'm thinking why. Like one is I like a thing that is well run if you haven't figured that out yet. And I wanted to build the kind of company where I wanted to work. Like I had a vision of how I think a company could run. A book that super has inspired me is by Gino Wickman called Traction. And
Mm,
I just love it. Like this very simple way of like keeping everyone going in the same way, unblocking problems. This is like my core way of
mantra. Yeah.
thinking. And so I just love it. It's my company. We run it using the EOS system of Traction. And it's great. And then the second piece is what you alluded to around purpose. Like, if I could really do this, like, if I could build something that gives hundreds of thousands of people access to opportunity and education. I mean, that would be like a life
Right.
dream
Yeah.
realized, right?
Mhm.
Those things. Make a company where I'm happy to go to work every day and we're having an impact. You know, that's
I think, what you just said about kind of, you were an excellent operator, and you can see you'd hire me again tomorrow. But now you're having to transition into that visionary role, let go, let other people execute. But I think what you really just said about how you're surrounding yourself with the team, with therapists, with coaches, like that shows so much self-awareness, Sylvie. How did you get to that point of having so much self-awareness?
I think I mean, partly it's like, okay, with age, one learns things. I think also it's like the failures in the beginning, like where we are, in full honesty, I was great. I raised money right at the beginning when we launched this. I'm a great
Mm,
fundraiser, but then I really struggled with sales and getting the revenue traction. And a lot of things we tried didn't work.
right,
We really pivoted our positioning, pivoted our go to market. The people I brought at the beginning were good. I mean, they're good people that they can have
sure,
excellent careers, but didn't fit with what we wanted. I didn't even
right,
know what we wanted. So I think part of it was just like, okay, I am 100% committed to this working. I have resilience. Like we have to figure it out. And then little by little, you realize like, okay, the way this is going to work is that all these different things have to develop. And I think I also realized that in this kind of a startup and doing what we're doing early stage, it has to be much more about me. I
mm,
have to be much more public, much
mhm,
more confident. I
mhm.
have to be all over LinkedIn. And again, like it's not okay, now I'm all over LinkedIn and I'm
And you
fine.
really are, by the way.
And I'm fine with it. But in again, that isn't,
Yeah,
I don't have a big ego and I'm not,
yeah,
like I'm not on any other social media.
sure,
Like this isn't my natural way. But I
right,
realized the only way this is going to work is
yeah,
if I get out of that initial comfort zone and make a new one. And it's working, like having a more public persona, people connecting with me, people happy to have a meeting, that whole part of it. And now it's working. And I think a lot of it was the personal transformation of me going
mhm,
from someone quietly sitting at a desk analyzing numbers and thinking about an idea to like doing
doing
the
it.
idea in a public way.
Yeah, I can understand, and your LinkedIn content is fabulous. Big fan, always sharing it, always liking it.
Oh, thanks.
I'm gonna ask you sort of the female entrepreneurship question now that you probably get a lot, Sylvie, around, you have been in very male-dominated spaces, CFO, ed tech, venture capital, private equity. You're part of the Female Ed Tech Fellows Network, and I would say, quite frankly, a role model for women in tech. Where's the, when folks come to you and sort of ask you this question, the advice you give to women sort of leading in a male-dominated space, where do you kinda come down on that?
It's a good question because on the one hand, we're in this moment where just bringing in diverse talent or different
Mm,
talent doesn't solve things. And I think we somehow you can get this idea it's like a zero sum game. Like, well, if you need more women on boards, that means fewer men and all these kind of thing. So I think my whole view is like, listen, half the people in the world are women. And so, like, our easiest solvable problem is just more gender balance because,
mm,
there's a lot of other like diversity issues where the problem is there aren't sort of enough people. Like,
right.
there are enough women. In fact, probably more women than men because women, live longer, right? So, um, we should be able to solve this. And I've I'd say how can I say? I think it's just like keep on and not get discouraged. I now have a theory, like again, as I get older and I look, people say that women opt out or they go decide to have kids or it's hard to
Sure.
balance. I don't think that's it. The more I'm in it is I think that you go through your career and you're in professional environments where you just don't feel comfortable. Now, whether it's overt harassment or just here's an example. I was at a Wharton event some years ago,
Mm,
and someone was interviewing Alex Rodriguez on stage in front of 1,000 people about this super interesting real estate business he was doing in Miami. And he was interviewed by a Wharton alum, and it was
mm,
at the time that he was dating J Lo. And so the guy gets on stage, and the first thing he says, like, "Oh, we're really impressed, by your girlfriend." And I wanted to raise my hand and be like, This isn't just like the guys' locker room. Like,
Right,
there are a lot of people in this. So you can just imagine if that was your job, that every
right.
time you're in a meeting, you're not the one talked to. And so I think it's just like keep as much as possible, keep opting in. Like, don't, and not to say don't be uncomfortable, but
Right.
push through those
Push
moments
through it.
because over time, then there'll be 2 women, then there'll be 5, then there'll be 10. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden the joke is like, um, where do "Wow, you guys are such a beautiful couple." What a different tone of
Yeah.
the same exact thing. And I think also education is a nicer sector than
Sure.
others. I mean, still men get more of the funding. I think there are just a lot more male
Yeah.
founders.
In general, yeah, in
Yeah,
general. I understand what you're saying. I feel, I tell this story sometimes, the last private equity organization I was with, we were at JP Morgan, and I walked into a room with my CEO, who was female, and my CFO, who was male, and myself, who was, head of product, and immediately everyone thought either I or the CFO was the CEO, right?
yeah.
Like, no one immediately looked at her and said, "Oh, well, clearly she's the CEO. It's gotta be one of these 2, middle-aged white guys," right? It's just
Right. But to be fair, like, I do that too. I
Sure.
mean, when I hear, like, the CEO, the image that comes in my
Yeah.
own brain, and I am a CEO, is of a man. So I think it takes time. But, this weekend you mentioned the female ed tech founders,
Yeah.
and thank you to Svenja Buson who's put this group together. But it was really lovely just being, like 8 women a weekend, and you're kind of just talking about the different struggles. I think maybe one thing is I've been in different safe spaces of founders where there are men and there's, like, a lot of vulnerability, but I
Mhm.
think in public, it's harder.
Yeah.
I don't know, men in general, but people in general, founders in general, and certainly I haven't experienced, thank goodness, too much, like, overt
Yes.
sexism, but listen, I've hit a glass ceiling, I've had,
Yeah. I
I've
get it.
I've had it all, and so there's definitely a way where it's like you can be in a group of women and just really say things,
Mm,
just much more open and
mm,
connect on a different level. Because I mean, it's harder even though I have, like, every privilege, like, I went to University of Chicago, I went
yeah,
to Wharton, like, my parents paid for my education, like, I
yeah,
have, like, a charmed and amazing life, and yet it would if I were a man, probably it would be even more charming and even more privileged, right? Like, it's just
sure,
the reality.
sure. No, it is the reality, it is the reality. You mentioned the Female Ed Tech Fellows Network, and I wanna talk a little bit about the power of networks. One of the things that we're doing here this semester is we're putting our entrepreneurs through what we're calling a connection lab, where we're really kind of challenging them to increase their networks, to kinda connect with others, try to grow those strong ecosystems. You've done that globally, Sylvie, which is very impressive. You've got all these communities that you're working with, Supercharge Ventures, Wise, and Qatar. How did you pull that off?
Right. Partly it's, time, but partly I think you're onto something with encouraging people to build networks. Like when I first launched Link, well, I'll say 2 things. One is when you're in a company, and especially a big company, a lot of your networking tends to be like internal networking because
Sure,
it takes a lot of time to manage all that politics.
right.
The joy, I would say, of leaving a big company is all of a sudden your network can be much more like external
Mm,
focused. And
mm,
actually, if I could rewind 15 years ago career, I would have already done a lot more external
mm,
network. It's like it didn't occur to me at the time, and I think that would have been I think it's good to just always be, like, keeping your pulse on things. But then
mm,
when I launched Lynx, I was immediately in all these, like, VC portfolio networks, and I thought, "Okay, great. Now I'm in this ed tech world, like, check, done." And I didn't realize, oh, in fact, the number of networks and people I need to be around is, like, way, way, way bigger. Like,
mm,
ed tech companies funded by VCs is that's one kind of people to know and great, and I love them. But then, like, you know, different kind of ed tech companies. What about just different entrepreneurs? Like, the other weekend, I was at a big event, a summer trip with lots of different entrepreneurs on all different stages of the journey. That's not just ed tech, that was like a wider network. It just made me realize that to be able to build a company, you need to talk to so very, very, very
many
many people, way more than you think.
It's so true, and part of what we're encouraging through our connection we're calling it a connections lab this semester is to kind of break out of that comfort zone and think about exactly what you said. You're here within the confines of a large university, and you can think that you just need to network within this university, but where are those other opportunities outside the university's ecosystem, right? That we're talking to.
Right, and to keep meeting people, and also we another mistake because 'cause we're all a bit busy, it's that you sort of you think about your network, like, when you need something, and so the
Right.
key is, like, how can you, without it being too much work, just, I meet you, and then I think, "Oh, Richard, this, let me, like, connect you to
Sure.
this other person you might like each other." You also don't wanna be sometimes one doesn't always like to be connected to someone, it's
Right.
like almost a bit more homework, but just, thinking about the people
Sure.
you know, answering when someone asks me a favor or I
Right.
really do try to
Try to help.
answer, not to pay it forward, but just to be the kind of person where you're like a valuable
Right.
contributor and you're not only taking every time, right?
And you've already done that for me. Thank you, by the way, by working with one of our cohorts, entrepreneurs. So thank you for that. Talent is everywhere. This is your podcast, has the title Talent is Everywhere. Um, you are uncovering talent. You are thinking about how people and organizations nurture hidden talent. Let's talk a little bit for a second about Talent is Everywhere, your podcast, and I guess your mantra, right?
Yeah, that's what we're all about. Yeah, I wanted to give it a broad enough title so that we could have like a variety of guests. And actually, it's interesting. At the beginning of my company, we were much more focused like on internal company
Mhm.
talent, the idea of sort of frontline workers or early careers. And now we've pivoted to this like, learning in the community. So we've interviewed, yeah, lots of HR leaders, learning leaders. I've talked to different coaches. Yeah, and I try to have like a really was inspired by one of the best podcast, which is Lenny's podcast, so she has a much longer format, but something just super practical. Like if people want to do like a skills assessment or think about
Mhm.
how to do a coaching session, or I try to have like a pretty not too long a format where we can dig into like, okay, like what do you actually do? Like, is it an Excel? Is it a piece of paper? Like, what do
Mhm.
you talk about? How does it work? Because a lot of these talent topics can be very, like, blah, blah, like, very vague, like, "Oh, ask someone their needs and then do an assessment." Yeah, but what needs? What are you
Yeah.
asking? How
Yeah.
does it work? Like, how do you do it? So that's what I try to do is, like, a practical case study
Love
about
it.
how did this happen?
Yeah. I've tried to use self-assessments a lot in my career, Sylvie, both for myself as well as for my team to help them kind of really uncover skills and competencies that they might need. But a lot of times with the assessment, it's hard, right? It's hard to do a true, honest self-assessment. Sometimes you undercredit yourself or you overcredit yourself, right? So I feel like what you just said about what are you trying to uncover? What the real why behind it is kind of where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
And a lot of, I think, HR leaders well, how to say, have to speak a little bit in generalities because 'cause they're dealing with, like, so very many
Sure.
people, so it's
Diverse.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how do you figure out the learning and development plan? Well, you talk to the managers, understand the needs. Yeah, that's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's talk about like one case. Speaking of assessments, I learned a thing the other week that I had never done before, which is the Enneagram,
Hmm.
which was a very interesting, it's sort of like 9 different personality types.
Oh, very
And
cool.
it was a very quick assessment and I was amazed. It just nailed me
Huh.
to a T and really helps you think like, oh, how can you think about your own strengths and weaknesses and then the ones of your team and how do you work together and get the most out of each other. So yeah, sometimes those assessments can be pretty powerful.
Mental note to go check out Enneagram. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about workforce transformation. Certainly something we hear a lot about AI, automation. It's changing every industry. There's upskilling needed. There's reskilling needed. Where are you thinking about that right now, Sylvia, as sort of a leader in the workforce education space?
I think it's definitely a moment of transition. The thing that I ask myself a lot is this model of sort of study 4 years,
Mhm.
have a bunch of skills, and then go into the workforce. That feels like it's changing pretty quickly. Though
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a college education isn't valuable because you learn more than just how to do practical skills. I think there's a sense of
Oh, sure.
civics and growth and like
Mhm.
emotional maturity that can come
Mhm.
in those years. But I also think the way that I went to college, which was this sort of like, gosh, now it almost feels a bit frivolous, like this sort of liberal arts, like philosophical journey. It
Yes.
feels a bit like of another time.
Yeah,
I also
certainly.
I think all these AI tools, it does mean that there's something about how we're imagining like an early careers
Mm,
role, like that sort of sloggy kind of job, is changing. And even I think as a society, we sort of feel like, well, even if there's better tools to do some of these slog things, you should do it so that you understand how it's done so that then you need the tool. But, you see what AI can do for specific certain things. You're like, actually, that isn't needed to learn. Like, for example, my son's 14 years old. We just got a fully electric car. I learned how to drive on a stick shift car. Like,
yeah, so did
my
I.
child needs to learn how to drive a stick shift. Like, maybe because in Europe, in the next 10 years, you still, if you rent a car in Europe, it's a stick shift. So
Sure.
today, that's still a useful skill. But like, or we get, wow, this is the real car is the stick shift. So that's what, and so I think that when I think about workforce skills, it's like, what are those stick shift skills where you and I are so attached to like, I had to learn this really practical, technical thing.
Mhm.
Therefore, my child must as well. It's like, we're going to have to start deleting a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And then reimagining how does a young person learn a job
Mhm.
when they're not spending like 3 years you know, doing all those tasks that we did.
Yeah, like we did, and then how do they how does that make them how does that upskill them and make them so much more effective at what they're doing because they have the AI to do a lot of those, let's call them stick shift tasks, right?
Mhm.
And really take advantage of that. Um, having learned how to drive on a stick shift, I can empathize for sure.
And I mean, I love driving a stick shift, so I think that
I was just thinking about that not that I was just thinking about that not that long ago, to be honest with you. I am a big, data person, I'm a public health person, so data, impact, social impact, real world impact, outcomes. Let's talk for a few seconds about what you're doing. You're a CFO, so I know you're very analytical as well, or CFO by training. How is Link sort of measuring its impact of its learning programs? I guess both individually as well as organizationally, Sylvie.
yeah, that's a good question. There's so much debate around, like, how do you measure, like, outcomes in education? Yeah, we're very analytically focused, and so some of it is just basic, like, literally how many people have access,
Mm,
level of engagement, completions, those sorts of things, and then on the other side, it's much more of an ROI, like, what's the business case? Like, the
yeah,
Deliveroo, we were able to do some analytics around, stickiness on the Deliveroo platform. So the gig workers who use our programs are more likely, about 40% more likely to continue to choose to ride for Deliveroo. So now, correlation and causation. Is it because they were offered a learning program that they stayed? Or is it that the people that are most active on Deliveroo are the most happy to do a learning program?
let's
Either way,
get
I think
started.
it's a good outcome because you're rewarding,
Mhm,
your best, most loyal riders. And with IBM, they have sort of two goals. Like one is really broad access. So I think there's one thing that's just like hundreds of thousands of people that we're going to touch. But then I think we also have to look at like the home runs, like who
yeah,
are the small subset of that who are going to use this free learning and they're actually going to like get a serious job or launch a career. And I think it's a mistake to think, the goal is that everyone lands their dream job because,
mm,
you might want to do a course and you're already having a job and,
right.
different people have different goals. But I think there is like like what's the core reason the company is doing it? And then let's try to get an ROI around
Associated
that.
with that. Yeah, I get that, I get that. I spent a little bit of time at the advisory board, on their hospital side, but often, at the time, we also had the EAB, the Education Advisory Board before the 2 companies split, and one of the, layup questions we consultants always ask our clients is, "What are the things that keep you up at night, Sylvie?" And I don't wanna end on a sour note or sad note, but I do wanna know what are the things, I guess, when you think about the future of lifelong learning and workforce development, what are the things that kinda keep you up at night? And I guess probably the things that Lynx Educate is most hopeful in solving, I would assume.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, because I think in terms of, the personal kind of company things that keep you up at night is that what surprised me is every time I get to like the next level of the company and I think, oh, once I'm there, I'll be like super relaxed. Of course, once I get there, then I'm like, oh, I'm not relaxed. I'm not at the next level. So part of it is just like, how to keep growing and how to keep using resources, in the right way.
Mm,
And then, yeah, more broadly, yeah, really thinking about how could I articulate this right? I just feel like we're in a funny moment of politics where
Mm,
I talk one on one to lots and lots and lots of people from companies, from learners, from people that are, and everybody like is aligned with this vision that there's like a corporate responsibility to society in some way. But there's a public dialogue around that that feels, I don't know, angry or wrong, like that people are afraid in some way.
mm.
Yet, but I do feel optimistic in the sense that uh, yeah, most people in the world, in my sense, is would like to open opportunity for others and that there's a corporate need for
Yeah,
that. So I'm just hoping that that we're not in some massive shift of fear or negativity where people aren't um, investing in the way that they should. But I do feel good where I look at the number of companies. I mean, so much data around like young people want to buy from responsible companies,
yeah,
climate change targets, sustainability targets. I mean, all these things. I mean, that is what's really driving it. And so I
yeah,
hope that that is the dialogue that will stay.
and we'll see continue for sure, absolutely. You've been delightful, Sylvie. Thank you so much. Sylvie Milverton from Lynx Educate. That's Lynx, Lynx Educate. Come back and see us again, please.
Amazing. This was so fun. Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome.